Good morning, Namchi. Good morning, Dr. Paul. Welcome for this entire day session. And glad to see people slowly trickling down. Today is the part 3, which is focusing on business knowledge and business acumen for internal auditing. One of the main concerns which is always expressed by the business is that auditors don't understand business. Now, if you don't understand business, how do you do risk assessment? How do you do audits planning? How do you demonstrate that you are adding value? So this is a very, very important session, and I hope you people pay enough attention to this, not only for today's session, subsequently in your work as well, because the business always expects auditors to understand business, and the recommendations are positioned in the context of business understanding. So this is a very, very crucial section. And with these few words, I request Namshi to take on from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, TK. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hey, good morning, everyone. Yes, today we have come to the last part of our sessions, which is the part 3 of the CIA exam. Now, normally for part 3, for the normal exam, it is the topics are the most widespread, all right? But for today, for the challenge exam, they have given you a lot of discount, I must say. So even like in terms of business acumen, some topics, for example, the motivation theory, these are being taken out. Even for the information technology part, there are some areas that were taken out as well. Later we will go through them, and I'll show you which are the areas that are still in. But you know, the challenge exam, I must say, is really a good discount, not in terms of monetary wise, but in terms of the topics wise. So with lesser topics, the time that you need to spend on preparing the exam would also be reduced, right? So you can focus a lot more on the part 1 and the part 2, like IPPF, like what we covered last week, like how to be a CAE, how to be an internal audit in charge, you know, all those topics. Now, for today, if we have time at the end, I will give you a few questions to try, and we can go through them during the session. Right? Let's see how the time goes. I reckon we will have a bit of time. We can also take your question and answer as well. But without further ado, I think let's start with the business acumen. Right? Like TK has rightly spoken, a lot of people think that internal auditors do not understand the business. So without understanding the business, it is very difficult for us to add value. And remember our definition of internal auditors. So we have to add value to the companies, right? It's also part of our mission. If you recall, that is what we covered in part 1, all right? Even down to the risk assessment, if you recall, what is the definition of risk? Risk means things that could happen that jeopardize the achievement of the objectives, right? So if you do not understand the organization's objectives, the strategies, then it is very difficult for you to do a good risk assessment. And without a good risk assessment, it will be very difficult for you to execute a risk-based internal audit strategy, right? So for these topics, it is really pointed out that it's not only for your exam, but also for the work that you are going to do, right? So with that, we go into the organization setting. So it means what the organization wants to achieve. So, and you have to understand the mission, the statements, what are their strategic objectives. If you look at the objectives, we state there strategic objective, operational objective, reporting objective, compliance objective. Do they sound familiar to you? Where do they come from? Right. The last 3 come from COSO. All the 4 come from the COSO ERM model. Right. So you by now you will see the pattern of we are keep emphasizing on the objectives, keep emphasizing on the COSO framework or the risk framework that are linked to the objective and linked to how you assess the risk. So at different topics, you will see it coming out, but the principles are there. So what I would like you to remember are all these principles. They are always linked to a few framework that you can always use, not only for your exam, but for your work as well. Now, this is again the COSO framework. I think we have discussed it before, so I would not go through in details, but I want to just refresh your memories. You know, there are 3 objectives in the COSO framework, and then there are 5 components, and all these 5 components are interlinked, and they can be applied to different levels of the organization. Now, when the company set their strategy, they have to think about in terms of their competitive advantage, their competitors, and then formulate their strategy, right? And in terms of the external environment, they will have to think about their customers, their competitors, their partners, outsource service providers. All these will impact on their competitive advantages. And then internally, they also need to look at their processes, okay, like their customer base, their process, their methodology, how mature they are in terms of supply chain, in terms of their competitors, and so on and so forth, right? Now, what is then got to do with internal audit? What is the CAE's role? So remember, you are being trained to be the CAE, right? And even if you are not there, you have to assist your big boss in order for him to achieve what the internal audit department needs to do. Right? As a standard, if you will recall, we are supposed to establish a risk-based plan. Remember the standards that we have covered? We must do a risk-based audit plan. Right? So all these would then determine the audit activities, priorities, right? And all these must be aligned to the organization goals. So you see, if we do not understand the company's objective, company strategy, how can we then do our job to be aligned to their goals? All right. So in the process of doing this, we have to consult the board as well as the senior management, take into considerations their inputs in terms of their strategies, their key objectives, and also you may also think about how they do their risk assessment and their risk management process. This will lead us to be part of the organization, right, and not living in a vacuum. Now, the next thing we want to cover is in terms of organization structure. Now, why do we want to know about organization structure? It is about organization. What is it got to do with audit? Of course, it has to do with audit, right? For example, different structure would give us different risks. Now, if it's a centralized structure, for example, the one on the left, you would expect it to be more bureaucratic. You will expect the decision to be top down, and as a result, in terms of audit, you probably would expect to see more policies, directive, and then when you do the audit, you probably would want to also focus a lot on the compliance of all these policies and whether the policies are adequate to cover the risk, right? Whereas on a decentralized structure, you would expect it to be less bureaucratic. You will expect it to have more free play, more fluid in terms of the decision making. So when you audit, you probably would want to see how people make the decision. What are the principles that they follow? You probably would expect it to be less structured or less policy driven. Is it good? Is it bad? It depends on the organization culture and the objectives of the organization. We cannot say one is better than the others. Each one has their own pros and cons. For example, in terms of the centralized one, you would expect things to be quite consistent across different departments, different countries, right? Whereas the decentralized one, you probably would see different countries may have a different so-called the strategy, or may even treat a certain customer in a different way. Is it good? Is it bad? Again, we have to go back to the organization mission, vision, and then guide you along with the decision, right? So just to sum up, organization structure play a key role in how controls are being exercised or executed, how risk management are being done, and there are implications for internal audit. Okay, and for you to understand, at least to understand the different structures in terms of their risks, pros and cons, and then link it back to your audit. Right. Okay, so in terms of how organization can be structured, it can be in terms of functional division, it can be matrix, different ways. Some even do it by products. If you were to see some of the international banks, they have corporate bank, they have retail banks, maybe they have some asset management, they have a private bank. So they structured it according to different customer segment or products. Some may do it by geographical. India, you are standalone. China, you are standalone, right? Each has their own pros and cons. Sometimes they have a mix of two, which is what we call the matrix. Okay. Now, matrix reporting means you have one person who have two or more reporting line, right? For example, in this chart, you can see like the specialists, they may report to a marketing head, they may report to a project managers. So is this technician, right? So these are what we call matrix reporting. Now remember, I shared with you a story on Nick Leeson. Now Nick Leeson was okay. This matrix structure was made very famous, partly because of Nick Leeson, right? As I told you, he bankrupted the bank, right? And how he bankrupted the bank, one of the reasons was he has many bosses. Now, each of those bosses think that the other guys are overseeing his activity. So A thinks that B is looking at what he's doing, B thinks that C is looking, C thinks that maybe A is looking, right? At the end, nobody was looking. So as an auditor, when you look at all this matrix reporting, then what are the questions you need to ask? Question you need to ask would be like, who is looking at what? You may even give certain scenario and then say who is responsible. So from there, you may want to size up how the risks go. Would there be any things that fall in between the gaps? Okay. So matrix reporting doesn't mean that it's bad. There are advantages, right? It's just that I want to share this story with you that it could lead to things falling between the gaps. Okay, so here are some of the characteristics of an effective organization structure. So if the structure is effective, you would expect to see that it reflects the organization size, the nature of activities, there is formalized of authorities, people know who they report to, people know their responsibility, how to escalate things. They also know the relationship among their groups, the departments, or even individuals, right? And they are able to coordinate things, align their responsibilities, and in terms of resources, will be allocated and deployed properly. So those are some of the characteristics of a good organization structure. Now, as we have mentioned, right, each type of organization will have their risks. So as auditors, it's important for us to understand all those risks, right? Like how the objective or sub-objectives are being made known to the people, are being cascaded down, how are they being measured, how are the things being coordinated, and do they need some customized controls, right? So how the control effectiveness are being monitored and escalated up, right? So all these are some of the areas as auditors we need to bear in mind, and also in your work, right? When you review the governance, the organization structure, these are some of the areas you want to look at. So we are moving from the structure to the business process, right? As we say, we need to understand not only the structures, but also the business process. So it's how all these business processes support the business objectives. So like different functional areas like HR, IT, sales, accounting, how do they support them? What are the key things that they need to do? Now, why do we want to know about all this? This is important so that you can review the risk that you need to audit. And by understanding the various processes, projects, and how they interact among the departments will then lead you to decide which are the core or non-core processes. Why is this important again? Core processes, you may want to review them more thoroughly. Non-core, you may want to have a light touch or maybe just a walkthrough, right? You don't want to spend a lot of time testing the non-core processes. So that is why we also need to understand the business processes and decide where to test, right? It's all risk-based audit. Okay, so again, to understand the business processes, these are some of the things that you want to check. It's like understand the objectives, the strategies, ask for the plans, the budget, and then the policies, procedures, KPI, and sometimes you may even want to ask for job description and organization chart to see how things fit together, right? And then at the later stage, you may also drill down into the process flows, or if they keep narrative, SOP, all this you may want to review to understand more about the business processes, right? So again, just take a step back. It is very easy that you go into the details of the processes. It's very easy, right? Always remind ourselves as auditors, take a step back. Why do we want to review this process? How is it linked to your audit objective? And your audit objective should be linked also to the organization objectives. With that in mind, then it will help you to be more focused on the important things, right? So for the exam, it's the same thing. So they may ask you certain questions. Always think back how to link a certain step to your objectives, and the objective should be linked to the organization objectives. Now, on this slide, there are some interesting things that I want to share. For example, as auditors, right? When you go to the process owner, where do you start? Of course, you want to start by asking like why the process exists, right? But if you go to the clients and hey, why your process exists, your clients may be thinking, what nuts are you asking, right? So we also have to be smart in the way we ask questions. For example, we can ask, what part of your jobs will give you the most satisfaction, right? Then from there, you can see, okay, what are the important things, right? Or if you ask about the functional areas objective, if you ask what are your objectives, the person will probably give you some high level things, right? So in a way, we may not get what we want. So tweak it another way. Okay, what if things go wrong? What are the most things that you can do to endanger the organization's success? Or what are the things that you do would help the organization most? Tweak your questions to make it smart. But of course, you need to, again, do things that we discussed last week. For example, reading your old file, reading the old documentation. There you can get a lot of background information. And then think of smart questions to ask and get more information from your clients. Okay. Now, of course, you also will look at like some of the policies, the procedures, how are they being directed? You know, is it very regimental, or is it like high level? You know, then you can get a sense of like the culture of the areas as well. Okay. Now, this map and weight business processes we show you here is is a very summarized part. In your reading material, you would have a bit more in terms of this matrix, right? But what it basically say is that in terms of like, for example, these HR processes can be broken down further to like strategic planning, staffing, technology support, and so on and so forth. Now, then when you look at in terms of their objectives or the risks, then you will want to see, okay, like for example, the strategic plan, does it exist? Is there any deficiencies in terms of HR strategic plan? In terms of staffing, are they appropriately skilled? In terms of technology, do they have the privacy risks? Do they take care of the cyber securities and so on, right? So all these are the risks and these are the functions that they do, and then you will want to rate it either as key or secondary, right? Here are just some examples, but this is a way for you to then look at, okay, in terms of this risk, where are the key areas that you want to review? And you want to focus your test on those areas instead of the secondary control areas, right? So this part, please spend time reading through it and understand how it works. Okay. Now this is a risk, impact, and control matrix. Now this is also linked to the areas where we spoke last week in terms of the work paper, right? And how you link from like the objective to the key risk to the risk assessment, like your probability or impact, and then what are the controls, right? So here they just link it down, and then for some audit, you may even have another few columns. For example, after the controls, you may have a column to say what are your test steps. How do you want to test this control? And then another column to reflect your work done or your finding. Okay, no right or wrong, but just to understand that this risk and control matrix start with the objective. Then from objective, you identify the risk. Then you do your risk assessment. And remember, we have that matrix, the risk assessment, consider the probabilities and the impact. All right. Then after that, you want to look at the controls and how to test the controls. Now, in terms of business process, you will also look at the outsourcing and the co-sourcing controls, right? We have spoken last week as well, or even in the last 2 weeks, we say that when you outsource your activities, you do not outsource your responsibility, right? It's likewise for the audit as well as the organization. So for the organization, if they have certain outsourced activities, last week we spoke about, you know, how do you audit them? and what kind of contracts. Remember, we talked about the different type of contracts. Then it will give rise to different type of risks, and then you may have different focus and different strategy, right? So here I will not repeat all those things, but just bear in mind, right? This is an area for your work. It is important. For the exam, question can be asked. Now, moving on, right? See, we have spoken about the structure, the process, the outsource activities. The next part is talking about project management. Now, project management, as auditors, you may be invited to do a lot of consulting services, all right? Even without consulting, there are also internal audit functions who are supposed to review the project management process. This is especially if your organization is undertaking quite a few big projects and the project can cost millions of dollars. Then you may be asked to look at whether the organization is carrying out the project management properly. Now, this is part of like the more on real-time kind of feedback. You do not want the organization to finish a project, then after that you audit and you find a lot of things is very difficult to unwind. So sometimes management may want you to be part of the project to review them, right? Then where do you start? Right? Of course, you have to start understanding their process first. How do they plan? How do they organize? How do they direct people? And how do they control the resources, right? So why is project management important? Now here you can see there are two lines. The first line, you start with very little planning. So the time spent, right? This is, or the pain that you have will be very little because there's no planning, right? But as the project proceed, you find that, oh, there are more and more time needed, more and more pains coming up, more and more problem coming out, and then a lot of pain. Whereas for this, the other method is you have proper planning, you establish the objectives, understand the stakeholders' expectation. So there are a lot of debate, argument, or discussion upfront. So it seems very painful. But once the objectives, the expectations are agreed, then it's more of the execution, right? The pain will slowly go down, and especially when the projects are going very smoothly. So you will certainly want it to be more upfront, right? The pain, but more structured. And you have higher assurance that the objectives will be achieved. Okay. So what are the challenges in terms of project management? Now, of course, to do a proper project, you want the goals and the objectives to be achieved, right? And you know that there are a lot of constraints, especially like in terms of resources, in terms of money, in terms of people, right? But there will be a lot of compromise, but you want to achieve your desired performance or quality level, right? And to be effective in prioritizing your resources in order to meet all those objectives, right? So those are the challenges, basically your resources versus what you want, right? So like we say, how do you then audit your project? So I think this project phase will be a good way to start. Understand which phase are you reviewing and which phase are the tasks that needs to be done. Then from there, you can understand what are the risks and what to focus on. Okay, so the project, of course, will start from like the conceptions, initiation, how the project should be, what the outcome should be, what do we want. And then once all those conceptions are done, then you start to plan how much resources, how much to invest, how many people to be there, what are the milestones, what should we achieve after 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Then you execute. Once you have the plan, then you go and execute. But execute doesn't mean that everything will go according to plan. So that's why you need always to monitor them and control them, right? Sometimes you may need to adjust your objective, maybe adjust your timeline, or even put in more resources, right? Until when you complete it, you still have to evaluate. Now, by understanding all these processes, you will then be able to drill down into different risks, right? And this phase is also applicable to our audit assignment, right? So you start with your what you want to achieve, what are the key areas, right? Then you do the planning, you execute. When you execute, you also need to monitor, are you going according to the timeline? And then after that, you evaluate, see how you can improve, right? So at the same time, you would also need to be aware of your project team. And the project teams is not only the sponsor, the project team or the manager, but it's also the project stakeholders as well. Because these people, you need their collaboration, their input in order to make things work. So it's for the project as well as your audit assignment, right? Can you imagine you have a audit CAE, your project manager, and your audit team without the stakeholders' collaboration? Can you do a smooth audit? Of course not, right? So this is again the project management triangle. Like we mentioned, in terms of project, there's always a pool of different angles, right? On one side, you want it to have the best quality, right? Then the other side, you want it to be quick. You want it to be low cost. Now, there are a lot of compromise, as you can see, right? Good quality means more cost, and it may need more time as well. But if you have time constraint, cost constraint, then what else can you compromise in terms of quality and performance, right? Doesn't mean that you want it quick and then do a lousy one. Not like that, right? It's a compromise, but the quality and the performance cannot be lousy, right? Okay, in terms of the project management, there are a few tools that people need to use to plan their project. Now, Gantt chart is one of them. So when you go back and read through, you will also need to understand what kind of projects or what kind of tools are suitable for what kind of project. For example, this Gantt chart would be suitable when you have little dependency, right? Like for example, here A, B, and C can go independently or parallel. Doesn't mean that A must be done before B. So there is no dependency here. So when there are dependency, then what kind of tools do you need, right? And for projects like audit, you can audit fixed asset, you can audit process A, B independently. So a Gantt chart may be a good way for you to do the planning, right? But when there are a lot of dependency, then you may want to use this critical path method or the PERT. Sometimes they use it interchangeably, right? So for example, this one, you need to finish this before you do the 2 to 4. Okay, so A needs to be finished before you do E. A and E must be finished before you do G, right? And from here, you will see that different activities that need different time, number of days. This is like number of days, right? So then you will understand that this is actually the critical path. So if you add up like 22, 32, 30, and 24, is 108 days, 108 days. That is the longest. Any other path will be shorter than that. For example, if you go C and J, this is 44 plus 48, right? That is 92. 92 days is less than the 108 days. So to speak, you can have a delay or even 10 days here. It doesn't matter because all these will take 108 days, right? But you cannot delay any of all these activities here because this is the critical path. If you delay any of these activities on the critical path, the whole project will be delayed. Okay, so that is the advantage of this PRT or the CPM method. So let you do a bit of exercise.
Mostly D, sir, and ABC also.
Mostly D, is it? Or B?
D.
B, okay. So, yep, the answer is B, all right. Okay, so this PRT or CPM, they can be used for both simple and complex project. It can be short, it can be long, right? That's why this is not the answer. Yes, it's used to expedite a project and lower the cost because you identify the critical path. So if you want to shorten the project, right, then you have to put in probably more resources along the critical path to shorten it, right? For internal audit, because it is all the tasks are not so dependent, so you can use a Gantt chart rather than the PRT, right? This one, the method doesn't really help you to remove the slack time, whereas it helps you to see which is the critical path. And then from there, if you want to put in more resources, you can shorten the time frame. But doesn't mean that it will remove the slack time. Okay. So moving on, after the project management is the change management. Now, if you recall, as part of the CAE roles, we have to be a change agent, right? So how to be a change agent? Of course, you need to understand the change management control. But bear in mind, we are not the one who implement the change, right? We are there to look at the control and give our opinion or give our advice, right? So in terms of change management, one of the key risks is about the scope creep. Just like internal audit, right? You have a lot of people after the planning on the field, you say, hey, why don't I look at that? Why don't I look at this? Why don't I look at that as well? So you have a lot of scope creep. So likewise for change management. So, but how do they control all this, right? And what are the change management control around? Okay, so that we come to the end of the section A in terms of the business acumen. See, it has cut down a lot, like I mentioned. So you see, it's just a few things in terms of organization structure, in terms of your business processes, outsource activities, in terms of the project management, change management. These are the key areas. And read up, understand the tools that they need to use, and then I don't expect it to be very technical. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, sir, we have some question.
Okay.
Yeah. So auditors follow RCM for their testing, and risk managers follow risk registers to monitor mitigation plans. Can you explain key differences between RCM and risk register in a manufacturing entity?
Okay. The question is, auditors use the RCM, right? And then the risk managers use their own risk assessment. So
Risk register.
you want risk register, and you want me to explain the difference in a manufacturing context. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, the gist of the things in terms of risk shouldn't be too different, but the perspective that you look at things would be different. See, in terms of the risk assessment, let me go from the risk assessment first, right? All the risk needs to be linked back to the organization, right? How it impact on the organization objectives. So whether it's risk, whether it's audit, it should be more or less the same, unless somebody miss out something. Then audit, you probably will, if let's say the risk manager has missed out something that is key, then you may want to bring to their attention. Bring to their attention depends on what kind of assignment you have. Is it advisory or is it assurance? Right? If it's assurance, probably it will end up as a fighting. Of course, the person will argue with you, right? That is beside the thing. But I would say in terms of risk assessment, it should be more or less the same, right? But then when it comes to the perspective, as a managers, they want to put in the controls, right? How to mitigate it. And when they think about the controls, a lot of time they also think about the cost and the benefits. That's why as auditors, we need to also understand this, to put ourselves into their perspective. Doesn't mean that we agree with them and with everything, right? Now, when it comes to the audit, you do not stop at the controls. You want to test the control. And when you test the control, you look at two things. The design, whether the design really adequately address the risk. If it's not, then you want to criticize on the design first. And if the design is good, then you may want to then test the controls, see whether they execute it properly. Now, let's say if we take the manufacturing context, right? So as a risk manager, I would probably think that, hey, my goods, right? To safeguard my goods. I just take an example, right? I do not want people to go into the warehouse and take all the goods, or pretend to visit the warehouse or do something in the warehouse before I knock off. And then I put some of the goods inside my bag or my pockets and then walk out, right? So what should I do as a risk manager? I probably would want to have certain control, the register, who can go in, who can go out. Do I need to screen them when they go out, or do I have to restrict them from bringing bags inside, right? So these are like probably the design. But auditors, you will want to say, hey, if I got the register, did I really enforce it? Do people really record it? You may even want to trace it to the CCTV. CCTV show that 2 people, 3 people went into the warehouse. They then check the completeness of the register, right? And if I have to screen the people, then where are the screening? Where is it being documented? So all this you may want to test it, but as a manager, I may or may not go to that extent, right? I hope this long answer address your question.
Minor nuanced answer, Namchi. In Indian context, the RCM is used when whether do a Sarbanes-Oxley or an internal financial control checks, where you have a minute, detailed process flow chart, drafting and walkthroughs, and identifying deficiencies, either a defined design deficiency or a follow-up deficiency. So that is used in that context, whereas risk register is used in the ERM context. And risks in the risk register tends to be much higher level risk, strategic or operational matters. So both have a different view, and normally RCMs will tend to have minute transactional level controls and risks which can go wrong, but risk register will have much more strategic risk which can go wrong. So that's the way we interpret and use it. I mean, that's in our context.
All right, thank you, DK. Yeah.
Sanchal, any other question?
Thanks, sir. So another question: in change management for exam perspective, relevant for internal audit or project management?
Both are actually relevant to the internal audit. See, change management, of course, can also be part of the project management. But project management could be very wider than just change management. It could be implementing of a new system. It may not be a change, but if you want to cut over from a system A to system B, then it may also involve the change management. So both are actually relevant to the internal audit work as well as the exam.
Sir, please, can you explain the usage of Gantt chart for internal audit scheduling?
For internal audit, right? Okay. I know we probably seldom use it, but it can be a good way if you have, let's say, 5 auditors looking at different areas. Then you may want to plot it on a Gantt chart, right? Who will do which part to which part, you know, from week 1 to week 3 or week 4 to week 5, you know. Then after that, you can have an overview of who is doing which part at what time. And if, let's say, after 3 weeks, right, and you find that, hey, somebody is supposed to have completed it but have not, then you know that is probably the bottleneck. And you may want to see whether you want to reassign your work or you want to add more people to that areas. So that is how it can help you. But doesn't mean that this is a must for you to use. Chancellor?
Another question: could you explain a scope control again? Slide number A33, please.
Slide number 8, is it?
A33 means last slide, sir.
Oh, last slide. This one.
Yeah.
Ah. Okay. Sorry.
Scope control.
Okay. See the scope, right? You when the scope is being agreed, right? You want to normally when there is a project, there will be a project steering committee, or if not, there will be some committee who can approve the scope, right? So you want to see if, let's say, they want to change, depends on how material. You may want to see whether they have gone back to the committee to endorse the change. If not, then who is authorized or who is the committee may delegate a certain amount of power to 1 or 2 individuals who can make minor changes, right? Because you do not want every minor changes also go back to the committee. So they may delegate to the project managers or somebody who can authorize more changes. Then you understand all these roles and responsibility. Then when there are changes, you go back and see whether they follow all those authority.
We have more questions, sir. So can we take it or?
I think we can. Yeah.
Okay. Individual KPIs of employees are normally confidential. So, how should we ask individual KPIs?
KPI may or may not be confidential. See, like as auditors, right? Some of your so-called KPI will probably be like the number of projects that you need to complete, and the project needs to be completed within a certain time, right? So you can't that part of the things is not confidential, but of course, in terms of the individual performance, how your quality, or this may be confidential between your manager and you. You may not be able to ask that, but what you want to do is twist it a little bit differently. Instead of asking for individual KPI, you may want to focus on the department or the group's KPI. That will make it less sensitive. So, for example, in your audit role, right, you will have like KPI like the number of audit that you need to do in a year. So, how many percent have you completed according to plan? How many being delayed but approved? So all those could be your KPI, but it's at group level, less sensitive.
Sir, since one process of doing internal audit cannot be initiated before completion of earlier process, can PERT CPM be used for internal audit scheduling?
Of course, you can use. It is what the questions there was asking is like in terms of the normal cases, right? See, when you answer questions, right, you normally want to look at in general first, right? Of course, there are very extreme cases. Nobody is going to stop you if you want to use CPM method to plan your audit, right? But what the questions want to say is in general, do you want to use it? You know, a lot of audit being like intertwined. Must A be done by B? Must A be done before B? Can you start them in parallel? Can you do B first instead of A? Then, you know, in terms of your CPM, it may be a bit more difficult to do, right? But whereas for, let's say you want to build a building, you must do the piling first, the foundation, before you build the building or the first floor, then the second floor, then you build the interior, right? But you cannot build the first and second story before you do the piling, right? So that is what we call by dependence, right? So hope that helped. Answer?
So another question, ERM risk register at organization level, whereas RCM are at process level. Design and corresponding controls listing. I think he has answered the question asked by other. Just okay. So little more clarity on slide number 21 and slide number 31.
31.
31 and 21. Yes, sir. This is the 31 and also 21.
Okay. Not sure what would you like to clarify in terms of 31? See, I think for the purpose of this exam, right? In terms of like all these tools, whether it's Gantt chart or whether it's all this CPM, the most important things to do is like what they can be used for, their characteristic, right? The way you want to use it in real life, there are a lot of tools on all these things for you to use. There are programs on this, and you can just plug in certain figures, and then you can use them. All right. I don't think the exam is expecting you to like become an expert of all these tools, right? So focus on how they can be used for, what is their characteristic, what are their advantages, what are their disadvantages. I think that probably would be good enough for you, right? So don't worry too much and want to be an expert of all these tools, right? It takes a while for you to use and to be familiar with, right? That is for the practical part of your job, okay? If you really want to use all this. And 21, right? Okay, 21, what I mentioned is that, okay, for this is you have to list down whatever processes, right? And you think through what are the risks that or the objective that you want to achieve out of all these areas. And then you start to identify who are the key risk player or the key processes that drive this. All these, like for example, here they talk about strategic plan, the key person who is playing or the key process will be the planning project or the strategic planning. You do not expect the staffing part to be driving this strategic plan, right? You also do not expect the technology support to be driving the strategic plan, right? So likewise, in terms of the staff skill of the staff, so the key one will be in terms of the HR staffing, that process. Whereas you can say strategic planning may play a part, but it's more of the secondary. So are the technology support function. So as you go through more and more of the risk or objective and the processes, you will come up with, you will identify what are the key processes that drive a certain areas. So when with that picture, for example, here, if I want to look at the strategic planning, right? So I will go to this process. I will not go to the staffing, I won't go to the technology support to look at the strategic plan. That is the use of this matrix, right? To help you identify the key processes that drive certain risks. That is the purpose of it.
Can we take one more question, sir?
Yeah.
In case of decentralized structure, should internal auditor consider it as an governance issue and recommend organization to implement centralized structure?
So the question is whether internal audit recommend a structure. Is that?
No, sir. In case of decentralized structure, should internal auditor consider it as an governance issue and recommend organization to implement centralized structure?
Okay. I would say, right, if you want to recommend an organization to change a structure, it is a very big decision, right? You would most likely, before you achieve that recommendation, you would escalate it quite high up in your organization, okay? And you need to have very solid facts to demonstrate that the decentralized structure does not work. So what are the evidence or the things that you have seen in order to push for that is very key, all right? It's a big decision. if you really have that strong evidence and very convincingly the decentralized structure does not work, then yes, you can push for it. But I would say that is a very, very big decision. Chancellor, do I answer that question?
Yes, sir. Can we take break, sir, or we will continue?
I think maybe why not we take one or two more, then we take a break, then
Sure,
we
sir.
can come back.
We have no question as of now.
Okay, okay. If no questions, okay. I think this part, the data analytics part, is quite short. Um, is it okay I continue with this first before we take a break? Or you prefer a break first?
We can take a small break, sir.
Okay, okay, fine. Then why not we have a 10 minutes break?
Sure, sir. So we will continue at 11:16 IST.
Okay. Okay.
Namchi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think Namchi, the question is probably what is PERT and CPM? Because most of them may not be aware of it. They were done it many years ago in the CA exam. I'm sure they've forgotten what it is. So maybe you could just tell them it's for each activity, that's the duration, and you're trying to find the sum of all the sequential activities which take the longest time, and then try to see how much you can reduce and cost and so on. Because some of the questions they get is based on, it's not so much on drawing and solving a problem, but it's more on the application of the PERT CPM. So maybe you could just a minute, you could just refresh their memory. And the other one where they were asking you on that key and secondary risk, you'll have to probably see, because in India we don't do much of these risk ratings and risk opinions. So maybe you could just tell them that the key is where a lack of knowledge or a deficiency is very serious, and secondary is where it's not so serious. A little bit of our Indian English, if you put in, it'll make it easy for the candidate, because for them it's the first time they're probably looking at the IAA material. So you'll have to kind of, it's an English to English translation actually.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in if you think I have to. Yeah, because
you know these translations make a big difference. So,
yeah. Because
that is a risk which is critical, a risk which can be absorbed, the key and secondary. Right, Nancy. So I'll just pop in the breaks to just update you.
All right. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because sometimes I cannot catch the question as well. So I'm not sure whether I have really addressed it.
No. I kind of guessed the difference in the wording makes all the difference. So because you're familiar with the COSO and the IAA standards, but we are more familiar with the Institute of Chartered Accountants standards here. So it's the English makes a lot of difference.
Okay. That helps. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we start, sir?
Yeah, we can start. Okay. Right. Before I move on, I think Dr. Paul has kindly pointed out some of the things to me during the break. So I just want to come back here on these slides. I think just now there was a question on these slides. So yeah, this slide is it shows this matrix that can be used to analyze like the process or the sub-processes, right? And what do we mean by K here? Means it's very key. That means it's the important part, the driver. And if something is wrong with this department, it will be very serious for this strategic plan, right? Whereas when it's S, it means like the supporting function. If things go wrong, it may not be so serious. You know, in terms of like strategic planning, it may not be so serious about the staff skill. It may not be so serious on the technology part. Okay. However, if the technology support is wrong, something is not working here, then it will be seriously impacting the HR privacy skills, the privacy risk here, right? So that is what we meant by the S and the K. Right? Now, the next things that you ask also is on the, okay, this critical path. Now, all these are like the different activities, right? A, E, G, I, or A, B, F, all these are activities. And the number here are just the duration. So for activity A, we need to take 22 days to do. And after 22 days, after the A, we can then start E. And that will take another 32 days to finish before we can do H and G. Right? H will take 44 days and G will take 30 days. And after G, then we can do I, which is 24 days. So that's why when you add up all these duration, this will be the longest, right? And all these, when you add up, is less than 108, right? So when it's less than 108, for example, this one 92, right? So there will be like 16 days of time. Even if you delay this like for 2 days, this one for 3 days, it will still end up finishing before the critical path. So the critical path means is the longest duration, right? So that is what this chart is about. I hope this helped to strengthen the answers for the questions that asked about this slide. Okay.
We have one more question. Can we take now?
Yeah, we can.
What are key difference in role of CRO and CAE as both role revolved around risk?
Okay. If you look at the 3 lines model, right? CRO fall under the second line, and the CAE fall under the third line, right? Yes, both are supposed to address risk, whereas the way that you carry out your duties will be different. So for the CRO, they are also part of the management. They report to the CEO, right? And they are supposed to help in the implementation of the risk, right? So they are not part of the transaction. They are already a bit of a distance, but they are still quite intimate with the decision, right? Whereas for CAE, yes, you are looking at risk, but because you are not part of the decision, right? So you are supposed to be like a fresh pair of eyes, look at things in a very objective way. So you are not reviewing your own decision. So that is the key part, the key difference between the CRO and the CAE. Okay. So I hope I answered that.
Can we take more questions, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, organizations do risk assessment when they do their business plan. Should internal audit take that or do an independent risk assessment towards planning for their annual plan? If so, how is this different from the other one?
Different from which one?
I think both the organization risk management and the auditor's risk management, independent risk
Okay.
management.
See, internal audit, right? I think we have to acknowledge that we are the risk and the control expert, but we are not the business expert, right? So the business management would understand the business, what they want better than the auditor. Okay, so we have to leverage what they have. We have to take into consideration of what they want to achieve and how they see the risk, right? If they have missed out something, we can propose to strengthen. But I don't think we want to start a independent one without considering theirs. You know, to start from scratch, you need a lot of time, effort, and knowledge to do that. Are we in that position to do? There is a big question mark. Whereas when you take theirs, you understand them, and then you look at it from a fresh perspective. Have they missed out something? From my understanding, have they considered this? Have they considered that? You know, to kind of like give suggestion to improve on theirs probably would be a more um, efficient and effective way to carry out your risk assessment rather than to start from scratch. And the risk of starting from scratch is you may be so disconnected because you are not the one who is running the business. Chancellor, did
Yeah,
I?
so we can continue for data analytics. We will take other question later.
Yeah, can. So data analytics, here it doesn't really want you to start to run program. Right? This course is not about asking you to start using SQL, R language, or Python to do data analytics, but more of like how it can be used. What are the processes that you need to go through, right, in terms of that. Now, so data analytics, first of all, is about gathering the data, all right, analyze the data and use it to provide insight to the decision, to the policies, to the procedures, right? So first of all, gather, analyze, and then utilize the results. Now, benefits of data analytics, this you have to pay some attention, all right? It can be used to generate some actionable information. So to improve your information, and therefore you can make better decision, right? In terms of efficiency, in terms of effectiveness, in terms of cost saving, right? And the gist of it is to make the automate the calculation, right? So you spend time analyzing rather than to spend time getting information and calculate them, right? As you may recall, right? In terms of the standards, we are supposed to use technology or analytics procedures for our audit, right? If you recall this. So in terms of audit tests, you will have to automate some of this, and that is part of our due diligence as well. Now, imagine that if you want to say find out duplicate payment. So what you can do is you can use all these tools to search out the same date, same amount, same vendor. You can use that. But if you do not use that, imagine you go and choose 10 samples, 20 samples, 30 samples, or even 100 samples. What is your chances of finding a duplicate payment? It's one out of don't know how many millions, right? Whereas if you use an analytical tools to search through the whole database, to search out, payment on the same day, same amount, same vendor, then you can have assurance of like the whole population, right? So that's why they are saying we have to use analytical tools when possible. If you do not use it, then your method, although spending a lot of time, but may not be effective. And then that will bring the questions of whether you are exercising your due diligence. Are you achieving the required competencies of the job, right? So data analytics, we have to be part of our work. Right? So to do that, you have to set rules. You have to plan your audit and understand what kind of data you need. See, just back to the example of finding duplicate payments. See, your analytical tool doesn't know how to do it by itself. So you have to go and say, okay, you have to search through this whole database, right? And you want it to be the same date, same amount, same vendor, right? Or even like same vendor, same amount. Maybe the date can be different by 1 or 2 days. You can search out and see, right? But you may find out certain regular payment, for example, your rental, right? Every month you pay the same. If you don't have the date, you fake out all this, right? But of course, then after that, you can analyze and put them as false positive, and then you can move on. Okay, so data analytics tool allows you to search through the whole database, so you can do your audit in a more, you provide more assurance, right? And it can detect maybe fraud, errors, or inefficiency in a better way compared to your sample check. Now, also just remember this 4V. Why this 4V here? The volume, velocity, variety, veracity. This 4V basically is to define what we call big data. I'm sure you heard about this word called big data. So big data means the volume is very big, right? They can come with a lot of velocity and being generated very quickly, and they have a lot of variety, right? So just have a bit of a understanding of this, right? Then data governance is an important part of the whole data analytics. Right? See, when you do data analytics, rubbish in, rubbish out. So if your data is not clean, then you will have a lot of problem when you do data analytics. So likewise, right? If your data is not clean, then how do you expect the management report to be accurate? So that's the same concept, right? So then as an auditor, we also need to look at the data governance. So again, here it emphasizes data governance is part of the management's responsibility. So what do we mean by data governance? Data governance would mean that how do you safeguard the data, make sure that they are accurate, they are complete, they are being made available on a timely basis, right? So for your audit, right, you can start to use even Excel now, all right, to do a bit of data governance kind of or data profiling kind of test. Now, I have started in my job, and I find it very useful. So sometimes you can ask for the raw data, right? If there are certain information that are mandatory. So that's why you have to go and understand the business and the process. Let's say if you have a payment, right? The name is supposed to be mandatory, right? But sometimes people may not have the name. What do? They probably will go and put in some fictitious name like A or Z. So use all this to search through your whole database to find out all these anomalies. Sometimes you may be surprising to find, all these kind of anomalies, which you can raise it as audit point. May be a bit difficult, but there are other things, like for example, age or some other customer number, right? You go and find like all this AAA, BBBBB or whatever, right? Surprisingly, you may find some. So that is part of the data governance, right? How do people, the management, make sure that the data is clean? Okay, so you look at their policies, you look at their procedures, their control, and very good thing is you use your tools to go and test the data integrity. Okay, now data analytics process, these are the things that you it's good for you to remember, especially if you want to do some data analytics. See, it first start with defining the questions. What do you want it to do? Before you go and get the data, and make sure that the data is clean, normal, before you analyze, and then you communicate the results. Okay, back to the audit test. So just now, as our example, define the question. What do we want it to do? We want to find duplicate payment. Okay, so duplicate payments, what data do I need? I will go and get from them, and then I will say, okay, the system, please find for me same amount, same date, same vendor. Then they will find all the information for me. I will analyze the data and then I communicate. And I assume that the data is clean and normal, right? For management, you will have to do this step. For audit, if you do this step, you find that the data is not clean, then you can raise an issue, right? So again, that's the difference between audit team and the risk management team. Okay. Type of data analytics. See, we talk about data analytics, but there are different types, right? And you will need to pay attention to the different types for your exam. And of course, for your work, it's also good that you know all this, so that when you talk to people, you know what they're talking about, right? So the most basic one is the descriptive. It just tell you what happened, right? Just like your chart, right? Maybe some of the trend diagram. All this just describe to you what has happened. So from there, you probably can find maybe some anomalies, some outliers, or you know how the trend is. So that is descriptive. When it's a little bit more advanced, it's diagnostic. Then you will try to find what happened, what caused it to happen that way, right? Then if you become more advanced, you become predictive. You start to say, hey, what is the probability that something may happen? What is the probability that these clients may go bankrupt, may not pay the loans? So all these are predictive. And the most advanced is the prescriptive, where you can really optimize your data analytics and have foresight. This will be if the economy grow by say 5%, what will happen to my bad loan? If the economy turn bad, what will happen to my bad loan? So all these are more prescriptive kind of. So for your exam, you will need to know, the different types of data analytics. Okay. So for internal audit use, you can use data analytics for different work, your compliance, detect fraud. You can even use it to find operational performance like the duplicate payments, or maybe some late fees, or is there certain clients who always be late, right? Or you can even use it to analyze the internal controls, like for example, segregation of duties. So how do we use data analytics to look at segregation of duties? One way is about the question, then what data to get, right? So now you want to look at segregation of duties. So what are the data you need to get? I can get it from the system log, right? Who input the transaction? Who approved the transaction? If they are the same person, then would there be a segregation of duties issues? Or within a team, do you find a pattern that when A input, B approve? When B input, A approve, it's always these two persons. Would there be some potential issues that you want to drill further? So these are things that data analytics can do. Okay, so here is just the different analysis. I won't test you here. Okay, so that is the gist of the data analytics. So key ones is like the process. You define the question, then you obtain the data, and then normalize the data, analyze it, and communicate the result. So that's the process, the different types of data analytics, right? And the benefits of data analytics. So this will be the key things that you want to pay attention to. That's the end of the data analytics. Any questions?
No, we have earlier question also. So can we take earlier?
Yeah, sure.
If internal audit functions provides consulting activity in risk assessment, can internal audit do an independent risk assessment?
The answer is yes. Internal audit, after you have done your consulting services, you can still do your assurance, right? However, certain safeguard needs to be put in place. So ideally, you don't send the same team back, right? And also, that's why during the assurance activity, you need to be quite upfront with your client. State the expectation clearly, right? And that's why the good practice is you want to document the expectation, your scope of the consulting upfront, right? To save you from all these objective or independent kind of issues later on, right? Okay.
Another question: do we expect question on crashing time in CPM or PERT and related calculation to identify new critical path duration?
Okay, I cannot say no. I don't really know all the questions, right? But what I can say is that calculation is quite minimal in the CIA exam. They have very few calculation questions. From what I have heard from the candidates, right? Would they ask you to calculate the critical path? That will be an easy question, right? So it is time consuming, but you can be quite easily calculated, right? So I personally do not think that they will give you such simple question. They would instead ask you about how is it being used, what is the advantage of all those, to kind of like more of see whether you appreciate all those tools.
So, another question: what is the best tool available in the market offering concepts like fuzzy logic, Benford law, process mining, etc.?
What is the what in the market?
Best tool.
Base tools.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the question is very broad. See, fuzzy logic, all this, right? It depends on the usage. See, fuzzy logic, I'm familiar with one of the usage is when they try to do the screening for customers' name. there are a lot of all these sanctions that's going on, right? The US, the UN, or whoever, they don't want certain company to deal with certain individuals. For example, if you are Osama bin Laden, right? Or of course he has passed away, but before that, Osama bin Laden, they don't want somebody who, I mean, a lot of companies to give loans to this individual. But can we say that Osama bin Laden, there is only one person in the world who call this name? Can another person be of the same name but of good nature? You know, how do you decide this is the real person? So there are a lot of all these screening things. So you use all those fuzzy logic. You know, even if let's say Osama, can I spell wrongly? Called Osama, you know, OSA, I spell it OZA, Osama bin Laden. Would the system flag it out? So all this, they use the fuzzy logic. But what are the base tools? I think it really depends on the usage of the thing. So I'm not sure I can help you with this answer.
Another question is also related to tools. There are suggested analytics tools that is generally recommended for internal auditors?
Are they? It depends on the maturity of of the the audit department and your resource, right? Basic one, I think Excel can do the work. See, you can use Excel to do quite a lot of things like the completeness of the data, um, the duplicates data. You can use Excel to find as well. You can also see whether there are anomalies in terms of or outliers. So Excel can actually do quite a fair bit of the things. But of course, if your data is big, then you probably would have to go for more advanced. Even in audit, like I think ACL, all these, they also provide certain tools to do the data analytics. But if you are more mature, you know, in terms of the skill set, there are a lot of what they call the open source, like the Python, R language. All these you can actually go to Google, find out some of the script that people have used, and then you can copy and then use them as well. So what are the tools? I think if you are starting off, my recommendation would be start with Excel, start with ACL. If you have a bit of budget, once you are more mature, then probably can use R language, Python, all this. Chancellor, does it help?
So please explain 42 slide again with example.
Okay. With example, okay, so say for descriptive analysis, maybe you would have seen this quite a fair bit. Okay, so let's say I ask for, say, bank reconciliation, right? So I ask for the number of items outstanding between 30 to 60, 60 to 90, and above 90 days. Right? This will be something like a descriptive analysis. Right? It tells me what has happened. Right? Diagnostic analysis. Okay, so for the bank reconciliation for more than 90 days, please then analyze what are the issues. Is it due to customers dispute? Is it due to customer not banking the check? Or is it because our finance people have not banking the check? So the different reasons why a certain bank reconciliation has been outstanding for 90 days. So that's diagnostic. Okay. Predictive will be okay. So based on the trend, I analyzed like the last 2-3 years. I realized that in January the volume will go up in terms of my reconciliation break. Okay, so then I will predict, okay, this year, would it be the same in January? If I know that in January there is always a peak, should I employ more, maybe 10 staff to help me resolve some of the break? So that will be predictive, right? Prescriptive will be even more advanced. Probably there will be certain, say, okay, in terms of bank reconciliation break, maybe now there's a lockdown, right? So activities will be a bit lower. What happens if we go back to normal? And in January, would I expect it to be 2 times, 3 times, even more breaks compared to the last normal years, right? If I expect the breaks to be even like 2 or 3 times more compared to a normal years, then what should I do with January next year, right? So that will be a bit like the prescriptive kind of things, and will tell me, okay, I should go and employ another 2 or 3 10 staff to help me clear the breaks. Okay, so prescriptive will help on top of predictive, may help me to suggest certain actions that I need to take. Okay, so that will be prescriptive. Network analysis is more of like see what are the things that depends, and then text analysis. This one will be even more advanced kind of analysis. So what happened is, okay, let's say there are a lot of typing on the Google. So the machine is now able to analyze all those texts and try to see whether are people angry, are people happy with your services. Okay, so if your company is very advanced, they may go to the Google, search all the feedback or what people talk about your companies, and then they analyze it and say, okay, how many percent of the people are happy with your company? How many percent of the people are not happy with your company? Not satisfied with your company services? That will be use the text to analyze. So this is not like a number, right? So change from the quality kind of things into something that they can analyze. Hope these examples help.
Thank you, sir. So, can we take more questions?
Yeah, of course.
What kind of questions that can be asked in data analytics?
Type of questions, I think, okay, one of the way they could ask is the advantages of data analytics include the following except, okay, so you have to find. They could give you a scenario, for example, okay, in terms of the bank reconciliation, to show me that how many are outstanding from 30 to 60 days, 60 to 90 days, or above 90. Then they can ask which kind of data analytics is that. So you have to say, okay, this is descriptive, right? It's not predictive, not diagnostic yet, right? Another scenario, they can say, okay, there are how many bank reconciliation breaks that are more than 90 days. So from there, it analyzes that of the let's say 50 breaks more than 90 days, 30 belongs to customer not banking in, 10 belongs to what, another 5 belongs to what, okay? Then ask you what kind of data analytics is that. So things like that they can ask. Or they can also ask you about the process, right? After defining the question, what should be the next step, or that kind of things.
Please explain veracity of data.
Where are
Data.
Please explain
Veracity of data.
Where are city?
Namchi, they are talking about the big data, Namchi. The
Oh,
4 V's.
veracity. Okay. Veracity means now that they can come with like the different forms, right? There's variety, and also um um okay. So the volume definitely is faster. There are different ways, and the things can change as well in terms of veracity. Okay.
Can we completely rely on the referencing of CI challenge syllabus versus GLAM and ignore the other topics? Please confirm, sir.
In terms of the topics, you can rely on the what we have covered, right? In terms of topics, but in terms of the depth of the topic, you need to go back and read and practice. Okay. For all those topics that we didn't cover, you can take it that they are out. But I would encourage you definitely to go and double check it with the course outline that they have given you.
Sir,
Okay.
another question, is the exam going to cover practical application questions on network analysis and text analysis from data analytics section?
Okay. I think most of the questions that they are going to ask, right, will be towards the practical kind of things. But remember, I have told you there are two levels of knowledge. One is the level P, proficient. So when it's proficient level, you are expected to apply the knowledge. So it's not only just read or the theory, it's how you use all this theory in the practical way, right? The other level, which is level B, B for basic. If it's basic, then what your expectation is to recall the facts, right? So an example, if let's say data analytics is level B, right? The expectation would be things like the advantages. So you have to recall what are the advantages. If they ask about purpose, you will have to understand, recall what are the purpose, right? If they ask about different types of data analytics, you have to recall what are they, right? Whereas more for the P part, if I'm just giving an example, if data analytics is P, then they will not only expect you to recall the things, they will ask you probably more in-depth things. How do you apply like the descriptive analysis to a practical problem? Okay, so that is the difference between the level P and the level B. So when you read through your exam material, please also pay attention to the knowledge level that they expect. Is it P? Is it B? If it's P, you're expected to do a lot more, right? So level P would apply definitely to your IPPF, your level, the level 1, right? Level 2, most of it will still be level P, okay? For level 3, most of the topic would be level B, basic. Okay, so I hope this help you to kind of like strategize your study.
So, does there have to be minimum duration gap for assurance services after internal auditor has provided consulting service?
The time gap, is it? After consulting, what is the time gap between consulting and internal audit? Is that the question?
I think a minimum duration gap is asking between assurance services and the consulting services.
No, there is no such requirement, right? just like just now I have mentioned, just make sure that there are certain safeguards. So first of all, establish the understanding of your consulting services. When you do the consulting service, what is your scope? What are you supposed to deliver, right? And then when it comes to assurance, if you have the team size, try not to send the same person back. So you can manage the expectation and the appearance in all objectivity, but no time gap. The time gap, I think, apply when you were, let's say, from the accounting department. When you are in the accounting department, you move to internal audit. Can you go back to audit the department that you used to work for? So there is a time gap of 1 year.
Thank you, sir. So we can take one more question and continue with our syllabus. So a question pertaining to part 1. Would like to understand difference between co-sourcing, subcontracting, and secondment in context of internal audit staffing.
Okay, co-sourcing is you, okay, first of all, it's about outsourcing. So you outsource means you outsource the whole internal audit department out, okay? So you get the whole team from people outside, maybe a professional team, to do your internal audit. That is total outsourcing. Co-sourcing is you have your audit team, but maybe for certain project, you do not have like enough expertise. For example, you need some strengthening of IT to do an IT, then you go and get a person outside, with contract to come in from a, say, from a professional firm, right? You sign a contract with a professional firm, get 1 or 2 people to strengthen your team. That is called co-sourcing. Co-sourcing, because you have your team and then you get somebody from outside. That's co-sourcing, right? Secondment is more of like you get somebody within the firm. Let's say if you are India team, right? You want to audit the finance department, right? And you need more people than your existing team. So you may get, let's say, a finance department in Singapore or finance department in China. There's no direct reporting line to the India team. So you get all these people who has practical experience to come into your internal audit team to do the audit together with you. After the assignment, they will go back to their job, right? Go back to Singapore, go back to China finance department. That is called secondment, right? What's the third one? Is it subcontract? Chancellor, is co-sourcing, secondment, and what else?
Just a minute, sir. It's subcontracting and secondment.
Subcontracting, I would think that is probably referring to maybe you sign a contract with somebody like a temp job or something, right? But most of it is we talk about outsourcing, co-sourcing, secondment. Secondment can say guest reviewer as well. So you may see a bit of different terms, but means the same thing. Okay.
Yes, sir. We can continue.
Outsourcing is actually they're talking about. Subcontracting is outsourcing. Because sometimes we use the word subcontracting instead of outsourcing. So it's the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you may have different terms. It's the same. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, understand. Sorry, Chancellor.
Kindly continue, sir. So we have
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, let's move into the last part, information technology and securities. Now, this part, there are actually two subparts. One is information technology. The other one is information security, right? So we start with the security. Security, you probably will look at this COBIT. COBIT is another risk framework, but it's catered to the IT part, right? The information security. So you look at how people manage the IT security, whether they have a plan that they implement, in terms of management processes and so on and so forth, right? Again, as in any framework, you do not need to memorize the whole framework, right? But more of like understand what they try to achieve, what they can be used for. So maybe let you try this first.
we have all the answers, sir, but all the options, but C, mostly C.
Okay, good. Okay, so when you read this, right, and this is a type of questions that I would like to put in to show you. See, when it's IT, you don't expect, okay, the questions to be so technical. There's no programming, there's nothing. It's about control, it's about the process, right? So it's just the same thing here. Whether you discover an audit, in audit, right? Whether you discover IT weakness or any other weakness, what will you do, right? So first of all, if you look at B, resolve the risk. So remember, we have to be objective, we have to be independent. So we will not go and resolve the issues. We raise issues, but we don't resolve them. Right? This is a management's duties. So it's the way that they have phrased it, but don't fall into that kind of trap. Right? It's a kind of trick. Don't fall into this kind of trick. The other one is to set a deadline. Now, I understand that in your report, you probably want them to set target date. But remember, it's management who set the target date, not the auditors, right? So when you see things like this, cross out B and D first. Don't consider them. They are part of management's work. It's not what auditors should do, right? Then you compare the other two. A is to communicate the issue to the board. C is to make recommendation. Let's think about your audit. When you see weakness or weaknesses, do you straight away go to the board? You don't, right? Unless it's so significant, then you go to the board. So what will you do? You make recommendation first. Eventually, you may go to the board, but not as the first thing, right? So the answer will be C. Okay, so C. Now, see, in terms of IT environment, right? IT is happening today. So what are the risks that we are facing? Why do we want to care about IT environment? That's because while IT make us more efficient, they also introduce a lot of other risks into the process. Like for example, the physical trial is being replaced by the data trial. You know, last time you have paper movement, you can trace from the paper from one document to the other, but now you cannot, right? Are you able to still be able to trace it? So that become a bit more difficult in the IT environment, right? So if there are hardware or software failure, imagine your system is down, your work will have to stop, right? So, and systematic errors. If one is IT is either you're right or you're wrong. There's not like human. Maybe 2% of the time you're wrong. IT, if you're wrong, 100% you are wrong. Okay. So few human inputs can be good. There is no human error. However, because there is no human input, you do not know what is being input into the system, right? Because of the environment, we also can see a lot of lesser segregation of duties. So there might be conflict of interest. You may not be so apparent, right? Who authorize all the access? Who, in terms of automated transaction, the authorization, because it's automated, so you do not know who have authorized them, and people can deliberately harm certain acts. If I'm not happy, I go into the system, I delete all the data. What will happen? So all these are different risks that we have to understand. And then why do we want to understand? So that you can talk to the management what kind of controls they put in, right? So the other things that is useful to you is in terms of the process. The IT management, the technical infrastructure, the application, and then the external connection. In terms of IT management, you will expect to have the right people, the policy, the procedures, the right directive, right? The environment, and so on. And then in terms of technical, you want to see what is the underlying business application, the technology that support all this, right? And the application, do they perform certain tasks, right? Then you want to see whether before they were being implemented, what are the tests, what are the requirements, right? That we will discuss a bit later. It's not only within the system, as you know now, things are also very connected. You want to see how the network, especially like now you work from home, your data when you send via the network, are they secure? Are they encrypted? So, like we say, when we look at all this IT, what is it got to do with our role? So, in terms of CAE's role in the IT auditing, there are standards that say, okay, we have to understand the IT control environment. We need to be aware of the legal and regulatory requirement. We have to assess whether the roles in the IT controls are appropriate, right? And then we have to develop our risk assessment process to identify all the monitoring processes and then assess whether they are being effectively measured and communicated, right? If there are issues, we are responsible to communicate all these issues to the appropriate level of management as well. So you can see that there are quite a lot of things that are expected of the CAE. When it comes to CAE, it means as auditors, we also need to support these functions. Okay. Now, this one is kind of a summary of where the other IT topics, right? So you can see that in a normal exam, they cover quite a fair bit of things like logical access. So it's not part of the syllabus here, right? We also talk about physical security. It's not part of here. System data backup, the recovery are not part of this exam. Whereas you still have the system development lifecycle, program change management, and IT operational control, right? So you can see it's quite a big discount for you to take the challenge exam. So IT operational control, what do we mean by that? It means like your operations, you need to plan for it. What are the resources? What are the things that you need? Okay, and then you talk of policies, the standards, the directive, what people should do, right? There are also controls on the security, which we will cover a little bit more in details. But by and large, segregation of duties is important, right? And then the users privilege, these are the areas where you can find audit points quite easily, right? In terms of user access, do people review them frequently? How do people give access to system? If people change role, do they also change their privileges? All this, okay? As operational, you may also look at like the insurance, continuity planning, the disaster recovery. If you outsource to external provider, do you also look at their controls? Okay, so all these fall under the IT operational controls. Okay? And for data security, which we are going to cover, is on-site, okay, during transmission and when they stop, including if you stop on third-party system, right? So when you use, when you transmit them, when you store them, all this needs to be covered by the data security controls. Okay. So what can internal audit activity do to promote information protection? What can we do? We can do a lot. All right. We first of all need to make sure that management recognize this their responsibility. It's not the auditor's responsibility, right? Information security function is so important, it cannot be breached, right? Don't take chance. And they have to be aware of any faulty security provision. Then they have to take corrective action to resolve them. And in terms of control, is you must have like preventive. If the preventive doesn't work, then you must have the detective. And when you have detective, you detect something is wrong, you must have corrective measures as well to respond to it quickly. Okay, so these are the areas that internal auditors can do and make sure that they are in place. Okay, now in terms of information protection, there is this triangle here, right? In terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What is confidentiality? Confidentiality means we must be protected like the privacy, right? You don't want like your salary to be put on the net. You don't want that, right? You don't want all your family's members to be put on the net, right? So all these are confidentiality. Integrity means it is complete, it is accurate, it can be relied upon. And availability means when people want to use it, it must be available, right? Have you logged on to like some website and then suddenly they say, sorry, system under maintenance, and then you cannot do it? How frustrated you are, right? So that belongs to like the availability. So sometimes all these can be also pull the resources in terms of different direction. For example, if you want to have more confidentiality, then maybe less people may find the data available, right? So it's sometimes a balancing act, right? And to achieve all this, right, we look at like the data security itself and the infrastructure security. And to control that, we have general controls. For example, the segregation of duty, your change management, your testing, all this. There are also application control. When we talk about application control, we are very specific to a software when you think about like the input control, the processing control, and the output control, right? So what are some warning signs that IT systems have some vulnerabilities? What are the warning signs? Okay, so some of the warning signs are that there are some very high number of security incidents, or they cannot identify the vulnerabilities in a systematically way, or they cannot prioritize, or there are poor working relationship between IT management and the IT security people, right? It's a warning sign, right? Or they don't even know what are their inventory, what system do they have. You know, I think this is quite a common issues in a lot of companies, right? Or there's no configuration management process. People can go and change it. So all this means that there are some warning signs. Doesn't mean that the system is already breaking down, but when you go and audit, how do you start from? Where do you start from? Right? Go and start with this incident security. Do they have a record? If they don't have, should they have? Should you raise an issue to ask them to do it? Now, if they have, take the security incident, look through the trend, and then start to ask questions. If they have certain trend, what are the actions that they have taken? What are the resources that they put in to address it? How do they prevent it? From there, you start to understand the process. Okay. So vulnerabilities, they are always would have, right? Now, I'm sure from time to time, your companies will ask you for patches to implement, like upgrade your system, patch it with certain securities. Why? Because any software that are in the market, right, they will have some vulnerabilities. Even if they don't have it now, they will have it sometime later when things change, or when the hackers become smarter, right? So they always have to improve on it. So you would want to see how people do the patching, right? Do they prioritize? How quick they do it? And is it like a continuous update, right? It cannot be like once a year, right? And the best is they are automated, being pushed down into your laptop. Okay. Now, as part of the securities, as you know now, things are being sent over the net, right? So for here, it's talking about encryption, and I want you to understand there are two types. One is the symmetric encryption, symmetric. That means there is only one key, right? The other thing is that it's asymmetric. There are two keys to it. There's a public key and a private key. So that is called asymmetric. Now, when it comes to security, just think about it. If you have one lock versus a door that you would have two locks, which one is more secure? Of course, it's two locks, right? This is more secure. However, it also takes time to unlock, right? So it will take up the system resource. So this is more resource intensive, right? It's harder to communicate, but it's more secure, right? Compared to the symmetric. Okay, so there's also this thing called firewall. Like when you go and log into your company, you can log on. But if I go to your companies, I cannot log on. Why? That is because of the firewall. So again, purpose of the firewall, right? It will block all the unauthorized traffic, improve the security, right? By blocking the access of certain server or application, so that you become safer, reduce the vulnerability, right? Because you restrict all the only people that you know, you will allow them to come in. So people you don't know, you don't allow them to come in. So it become more secure, right? Of course, if there are some intruder or some sabotaging, right? This firewall is supposed to detect it and then surface out, okay? And also provide the encryption internally. So these are some of the purpose of the firewall. Now, malware is another topic that you may want to have some recall in terms of the knowledge, right? Now, what is malware? Malware is malicious ware, right? First of all, understand what is virus and what is worms. Now, virus and worms, are they the same thing? They are not. Virus will harm the system. For example, if I have a virus, I can delete your information, right? Worms technically do not do that. But how do worms cause a disruption to the whole system? Worms is things that, for example, if I plant it into your system, all right, at certain time, it will start to send mails out to all the people in your address book. So imagine how many people are in your address book. Thousands or even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. All these mail come out. And if out of your friends or your addressee, some of them also being infected by this malware, then again there will be mail sending out from their address book. So it's just taking an analogy. If you ask the whole Delhi, all the people in New Delhi to move to Mumbai, and all the people in Mumbai to come out at the same time, take the train, move to Bangalore, what would happen to the transportation system? It will be all jammed, right? So that is the purpose of worms. When you have all the mail sending out from everyone's address book, what would happen to the network? It will be so overloaded. And when people need to send real mail, it will be jammed in the system. Okay, so that is the key difference between virus and worms. Now, Trojan horse, I think all you know already, right? It's like something like phishing, right? It can send you a picture, very interesting. You know, if you click on it, then either a virus or worms will go into your system, right? And some of all these malware can be quite okay, like these botnets. It can study your pattern, your behavior before it attack. Now, I share with you a story. This is a real story. It happened in the UK, right? So these companies are probably being they must have done certain social engineering, attract people to click on certain things. So certain botnets or some virus have gone into the system. So they start to study the pattern. They even read how you write email. Okay. So on one evening before a long holiday, the hackers wrote an email to the CFO, pretend to be the CEO, right? So how they can do it? They can just do up a fictitious email that look very similar to your company's email and use the CEO's name, and they send it to you. If you are not careful, you would think that it is from the CEO, and that was what happened to the CFO. So the mail wrote to the CFO, asked him to transfer a big sum of money to a certain bank account because the CEO is going to discuss an acquisition with a party and need the money urgently. If the money is not there, then the acquisition will fail. So why the hackers are so confident about doing that? That's because they have studied what the CEO has been doing. So they knew that he was traveling out to negotiate certain acquisition, and they used that before a long weekend, and they knew that the CEO was not contactable at that time, and they strike it just before the CFO knock off. So being panicked, the CFO thought, oh, and it's true that the CEO was going out to negotiate certain acquisition, and it is true that things can happen very quickly. So out of panic, he followed the instruction, sent the money to the hacker's account. And over the long weekend, you know what happened. So when he came back, all right, when the CFO got the chance to talk to the CEO said, no, I never sent such an instruction. Then they knew that something is wrong. Okay, so quite sadly, this CFO got sacked because of that. Right? So you see, even people who are very senior also fall into this kind of trap. Right? So it is a very serious problem. So as auditors, you may want to go back, look at your companies, how they train people on how to do, prevent all these hacker, social engineering, how virus or malware can come into your company. See, what they can do is quite simple. They send mass email to the whole company. Right? You just need 1 or 2 employees who are not aware, click on it, then your system can be compromised already. Another example is you heard about Sony, right? Sony, they went to make a film on the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, right? Of course, North Korea was not happy. They asked Sony to stop it, but Sony didn't want to stop. They continued to air the movie, right? There was one day when all the Sony employees turned up. When they turned on their computer, they saw some red color, features that come out. Everyone saw that. Why? Because the system has been compromised. So it could be just 1 or 2 people who go and click on certain things, and then the virus has come in and permeate the whole company's network. And when you turn on, you saw those things. So that was what North Korea tried to send a message to Sony, to tell them, to warn them, if you continue not to follow my instruction, I can take over your system quite quickly, right? So of course, Sony, after seeing that, they actually pull back. They try to stop the movie, but within 24 hours, they make a U-turn and they say they continue to air the movie, right? There are many of all these examples. Another one is I think Bangalore, right? Central Bank of Bangalore, quite near you, your neighbor. Even at Central Bank, their system got hacked as well, so that the hacker compromised one of the PC or the laptop in the Central Bank. And then they used that to send a SWIFT message from the laptop through the SWIFT system to transfer, I think, billions of dollars. Again, it was before the weekend. So they sent it to somewhere, I think, in Philippines. So because SWIFT is just a message system, so when it is authenticated, so the banks of the central bank receive the message to transfer the money, right? So the hacker took away some money. Luckily, not all. I think the total amount was like billions dollars, right? But luckily, they recover some. So you see, all these are quite, I would say, prevalent. There are a lot of all these incidents that have happened. So it's time that as auditors, we need to play a part to help your organization raise the awareness, make sure everybody understand the risk, because they only need 1 or 2 employees who are not aware, and they can penetrate the whole organization already. Okay. So of course, there are also internal threats, right? There are some employees who may not be happy. They may do certain attack, change certain parameters to when the system reboots, they change certain parameters so that later they can attack it, or they manipulate certain data, hide certain data, or do certain what they call salami technique or round down. This happen especially in a bank. As you know, when you deposit money in a bank, you probably earn like 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% interest. Some of the banks may calculate the interest on a daily rest, but they give you every month, right? So every month you may receive, let's say, an interest of $10, 52 point something cent. You may not be aware that the point something cent were being taken away by the internal employee, right? It's so small to you, but when they have a lot of customer, this employee can actually receive quite a sizable amount of money. Okay, so that's what they call a slimy technique. So really, to protect the system from the malware, there are some techniques here. You may want to look at your company, right? You want some homogeneous system, right? It's consistent, it's not standard, rather than everybody start to do their own thing, right? Some prompt update, the patches. You may want to have update antivirus, right? Certain code, you may want to restrict it so that you won't let everybody has certain privileged code that can change things, right? There are certain baseline control. For example, Visa card holders, you need to have certain baseline control. So as a companies, you may want to also have certain minimum baseline control, right? May have certain phishing filters, some user identification so that you can authenticate who are they, and then the password training, and now the awareness in terms of the phishing, like I mentioned just now, in terms of a few cases, right, and how the hackers penetrate. They compromise just one or two laptop or terminals. From there, they can control your systems already. Okay. So let's try a little bit of things here.
We have all the answers, sir. B and C mostly.
B and C mostly, right? Okay. Okay, see, this one is talking about security, right? They are worried that there is some confidential information about new product launch. So they have put it on the intranet. Although they have controls, but they are afraid that it may be hacked. Okay, so they already have appropriate information control. But what should be the best course of action? See, you have good control, but it's never a guarantee. It's never an absolute assurance. It's always reasonable assurance. Okay, now A, you say that A is safe. So this one is too extreme because it seems to tell people, hey, I have good control, nothing can go wrong. So this kind of answer, normally you wouldn't want to go for it. Okay. Now, install a pop-up blocker. See, this is something that will got nothing to do with this. How would pop-up blocker help you in the hacker? So most likely this one is something there to just trick you. If you don't understand, maybe you would go for it, right? So I would cross out A and D first. Okay. Now you can increase the level of intranet security, right? You can do that. Bear in mind they already have it. You can increase, but how much do you want to go for it? Right? It is a solution, but it costs money. The other thing is to remove the data from the intranet until the launch. Once the launch it go public, you can put it in the heck, doesn't matter already, right? So you see, this can be an effective way and cost little money, right? So you will want to go for that. Okay. B can be an answer, but it costs money and doesn't guarantee you that people cannot hack, right? So a better one would be a C. So from these questions, right, you can see that how they test you. It's not something technical. It's more of like some logic. How do you achieve certain objective? Okay. Okay.
So can we take some 5-10 minutes break?
So yeah, I was about to ask you. Yes, please. Let's take 10 minutes break. Let's take 10 minutes.
So we will meet at 12:48 Indian time.
Yeah.
Sure. Can we take some questions, sir, meanwhile?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Is it recommended to read all practical guides to prepare for exam?
I think if you can do that, it will be very good. But I don't think it's necessary, right? But this is my own opinion. Read the guide that are given to you, right? Um, when you say all the guide, I presume you are referring to the implementation guide on the website, right? I don't think you need to read all of them, but for certain standards, if you are weak, maybe you can supplement that. But more of like read through um, the materials that are provided to you as part of the reading guide. Okay, so all those you may want to at least skim through, understand what it is, go and practice. Practice it from the GLAM uh, question bank, all right? Then you can analyze which are the areas that you are weak in. Then you may want to go back and read it more thoroughly and then come back and do the questions again to see if you can improve. So do it like a reiterative kind of process, not a one-way ticket kind of thing. So that would be what I suggest. Yeah.
Sir, from the exam perspective, do we need to remember various version of COVID, COVID 4.1, COVID 5, etc.?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No. I think the latest is like COVID-5, right? I would think that would be something that your guide will be referring to. Don't go into the other version. You have more than enough from the guide already. Okay.
Can you please take us back to slide 50 again? A50. I think it's 50 because it's from third topic only.
Is this the one?
Yeah, 50. Slide number 50.
Okay. I must say that okay, all these slides are provided by the IIA in, all right. So I presume that they are accurate in terms of the syllabus, all right. But do double check it to the exam syllabus that you have. Just to be double sure, you don't want to just mistake anything, right? Okay. Yeah, there was a question asked previously whether we can circulate the guide. The answer is no. I'm not supposed to circulate any guide to you. All right. The copyright belongs to IIA.
Thanks, sir. So we have already updated that, and you have all confirmed today. So we have another question. What is rounding technique and salami technique?
Okay. The rounding technique is okay. I give you an example. Many years ago, actually, it happened in Singapore. All right. When this developer is very smart, right? So that happened in a bank. So when the bank calculate the interest rate, So you may receive like, let's say $1.10, $1.1056, right? So if I pay you 1056 cent, 0.1056 is supposed to be 0.11, correct? However, the bank will only pay you 1.10, right? The 0.0056 has gone into this developer's bank account. So as a customer, you probably will not go and realize that 0.0056 cents has been taken away from your account. You wouldn't realize that. But for the developer, each customer, if I can get 0.0056 cents, although it's a small amount, but with thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of customers, that can add up to be an amount. So by taking away that 0.0056 cents, that is like a rounding down or slimy kind of technique. So they steal away like a very small decimal place of your money that you don't even realize, but when they add up to them, it's quite a fair bit of amount. So that is what we call the slumming technique.
So we have 2 more questions. Can we take, then proceed further?
Yeah. We can take 2 more.
So,
Yeah.
What if employees have to coordinate for new product launch on intranet site?
that is the question. See, it really doesn't matter. You know, why do you want to put such a confidential kind of information on your intranet? You know, even if people don't hack in, maybe some employee may read it and go and tell somebody, and then your information will be leaked out, right? So actually, there is no need to put it on the intranet for people to see. Yeah.
I have purchased GLAM material provided by CIA Institute. I want to understand understand that there any consolidated 3000 MCQ links, or is it the section and topic wise question that are available which make out 3000 MCQ?
So, sorry, the question again.
Yeah. So, sir, I will check with the GLAM and will provide the information.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's regarding GLAM material.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I may not be familiar with the GLAM material that they provide. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, we can continue.
All right. Thank you. So we were at the privacy, right? Yeah. Okay, so here we are in terms of privacy. So last week we have spoken about it in terms of the privacy, some of the laws, right? So here is talking about from the system perspective, how do we support the privacy requirement and how do we protect customers' privacy? Okay. See, again, this one is what we have covered before in terms of you have to give notice to people, you have to let people have a choice. If people want to correct their information, they must have the access, right? So how do we then implement the security and enforce it? Is something that in terms of system, we need to pay attention, right? This one is the GDPR. We have discussed it last week, right? See, there are quite a few things here. Right? People need right to be informed, right to have access to their personal data. So in the system, how do you give access to all this? You know, if people want to change their information, how can you give access to for them to rectify their information? And there's a right to be forgotten. So that means if I'm no longer your customer, within a certain time frame, you need to delete my system or purge my information, right? So you cannot retain my information forever. So that is some implication for the system, all right? And how can I take my own data away or transfer it to somewhere else? Do I have the right to do it? How can I do it? You know, so all these are some of the system consideration, and these are requirements that you probably want to look at how your companies deal with. Now, this GDPR is for the EU. However, if your companies have any EU resident as a customer, then this rule would also kick in. Okay. Now, here is talking about some of the emerging technology. As you are aware, they probably have like some Internet of Things, right? So, what are the implications? It means that there will be more data points for the organization. So, there will be more opportunity for hacker to hack. So, how do you or your companies protect all these entry points, right? And more, you can see that even your phone, you can have like your face, your biometric, your fingerprint to authenticate. So how do people make use of all this technology to strengthen the authentication processes, right? And people are starting to analyze your behavior, right? Whether it's ethical or not ethical, right, is another point to be debated. But there are capability of your companies. For example, they can monitor what time you log on, what time you log off. You know, during the office hour, do you work or do you take a break? So all this, they have the capability to do it, right? And in terms of system, the data information loss, you know, how people encrypt it to prevent all these critical data from being lost, right? The machine learning are also starting to kick in to try to understand what is the good or bad behavior, right? Cloud computing, another thing, emerging on the cloud. Now, what do you need to know about this? At least have some understanding of what it means, what it is. You know, you do not want them to have certain questions that come out, and then within the choice there is some cloud computing, there is IoT, and you do not know what it is. So at least you can recall some of all these terms, right? Others, cybersecurity risks, I think again some of all these we have touched on during the malware, but again it's like some of the terms. What is like the designated denial of service or denials of service? Denials of service means they don't let you have the service, right? Imagine you log on to your bank and they don't allow you to see your balances, they don't allow you to transfer money, right? Designated means they is a coordinated one, so maybe it's like a bit widespread, you know. So again, like some of the terms like memory, non-memory, resident of virus. So memory means the virus stay there. Non-memory, after they attack, the virus can dissolve itself. So it make it more difficult for you to trace them, right? Polymorphic threat means the virus can actually change or mutate, right? Just like the COVID-19, they can mutate in your system, right? So other terms like spamming is like just bombard you with different messages. Spooling, they can set up like a fictitious website. For example, IIA India, they put something there. You are not aware. You thought that is IIA India's website. You key in your user ID, you key in your password. They steal your password, and guess what? A lot of people use the same password for many other things, so they can try their luck somewhere else, right? So all these terms you do not need to memorize them, but at least know what they mean. So at least when if let's say one of the answers they come out with all these different terms, you are not lost. Okay. Information security policies, these are some of the purpose that they need to achieve, right? I think I leave it to you to read. They are not technical. So the 3 lines model in terms of cybersecurity, again, the first line, operation management, second line, risk and control, compliance, risk management, here, internal audit, third line. So what do you do, right? You have to be independent, objective, all this we have discussed before, right? So it's the same in terms of cybersecurity. So you don't overstep into all this management function, right? This control security framework, I find it good in the sense that you need to identify what you need to protect. Then you think about different ways of protecting it. And just protecting is not enough. You need to detect if something goes wrong. And if you detect something, how do you respond? How do you recover? Right? So I like this framework in terms of the function, the process, right? Okay, so what is the internal auditor's role in terms of software application development? So from here, we are moving out of the security. We want to go into the so-called IT part. IT start with the software application, right? The development. So in terms of software development, what do we do? Software development is the management process. But for us, we may want to review some of the feasibility study, some of the risks, the controls, and then whether the budget is reasonable, and then raise issues if we think that things are not correct. Okay, so this SDLC life cycle is part of the IT part, is how people develop the system. Now, when you go back and read the SDLC, just pay attention to each of the stages. What are the activities? What are the output? All right. So for system development, you want to develop like a long-term strategy or plan for the IT. So that is very high level. So that is something that you probably want to remember, right? From there, then you may go into system analysis. That is where you gather people's individuals or end users, their requirement. So what will be the output from there? Maybe you have like a certain blueprint, system requirement. Then from system requirement, you go deeper into the system design. You want to design how the system flow. Okay. Then from system, you've got the design, the system flow. You will decide whether you want to build in-house, which is programming, or you want to go and buy. If you buy, will you want customization or you want some configuration, right? Be it built in-house or you buy, you need to do testing for the system. After testing, then you convert, you implement them. After that, you still have to monitor, redefine, and give feedback to the system planning. And this is the whole system life cycle, right? Now, in terms of analysis, a little bit more details here. When you do the system analysis after planning, so bear in mind, this is a system analysis here. So you may want to look at who needs to be there, right? Identify their needs, assessment matrix, then you analyze, propose certain needs, resource, and make sure that it's aligned with the strategy, then do the cost benefits analysis and identify what are the alternatives. Okay. So a typical question about SDLC is something like this.
So we have mixed answer, but mostly B.
Okay. All right. So this is probably the first time that you have gone through the SDLC, but this is like a good feel for you. You know how the question can be posed, right? The answer here is actually C. Now, okay, for long-term technology strategy, it is the phase where you do the planning, the very first phase, very first phase. When you do planning, you come up with the long-term technology strategy, right? Then from there, you do some system analysis, which is here. Then you may have certain requests for system design, right? After you have the request for the design, you go into the system design stage. After the system design stage, then you probably come up with this detailed system blueprint, right? After the system blueprint, you may decide whether you want to build or you want to buy, right? Whether build or buy, you want to customize, you do testing. That's where the testing will come up before you go into the implementation, right? So that's why this is the first time. It doesn't matter, but when you go back, you read through, you want to understand all these different phases. Okay. Now we mentioned the different phases. So now in terms of system design, these are the things that you define the functional, you may come up with some detailed blueprint. After that, you decide whether you want to buy or you want to inbuild, you get approval and so on. Okay. Then there is this term called online programming, right? It's something that is new. When it's online, there are advantages, there are risks as well. Online is that it will start because everybody can start to do their programming. It's like a community, so it accelerates your development. But of course, they can be subject to some unauthorized access, some authorized overriding, some even delete as well. Okay. So here there are different type of testing. So when you go back and read your material, you also want to pay attention to different type of testing. So it's not, no, we always talk about user acceptance test, but what actually are the testing? So debugging, look at the bugs. Load test, you want to see how the system can handle the heavy workload. Like for example, if your system can your normal payment is, let's say, 1,000 per day, so your system maybe can handle 1,000, 1,500. But what happens if, let's say, there is a festive, there may be 2,000, 3,000 payment on that day? Can the system handle? So these are the things that you have to test upfront. Okay. Throughput, make sure that the system can churn out certain transaction or some reports at certain date, right? Alpha test is done by developer, beta test done by user. There's this thing called pilot test where you test a certain part of it, right? Regression test, especially if you have got a certain module that are changed, then can they work with upstream system, downstream system? Okay, so you need to do like all these regression tests. Then you may want to do sociability tests to make sure that the interface can still work. Okay, and of course the security test, check all the vulnerability and all this. So you can see in terms of before the system go live, there are so many tests that you need to do. Okay. Then of course after that you're happy with the test, then you convert, you implement, and then finally you have to do the documentation, which is the most painful part, especially when the system are implemented in a very tight deadline. Okay. Now, what we have discussed just now was in terms of SDLC. As you can see, there are a lot of steps. So the drawback of that process, although it's very structured, it may take a lot of time. So sometimes people criticize it. You know, when the user start to talk about the requirement until it go to build to test, it may be like 1 year, 1.5 years later. So people say, hey, after 1 year, 1.5 years, my requirement has changed, right? Now that you build the system. So another alternative is what we call the rapid application development methods. So rapid means they can do it quicker. So there are different ways, like the joint application development. So you do it, or you build different module. You use it, then I build another module. So it breaks down the whole project into different module. And the advantage is that I build the module, you use it, you can give feedback before I build another one. Okay, so it kind of like shorten what you have said and what you see, right? Versus the SDLC, what you have specified, you may not see it until 1 year later. Whereas for this rapid, you may see it next month, next 2 months. Okay. So in terms of rapid application developments, there are different types, right? Like the objective-oriented, you see what are the objects, and then you want to see which one you want to inherit. You then allows collaboration and work from there. They may be by certain component, or you use certain old system, you re-engineer, you reuse certain part, right? Or you let the end user build it, end user computing. So one of the very common end user computing is your spreadsheet, right? You may use certain spreadsheet, put in certain formula and all this. Now, I'm not a fan of end user computing, right? If your company have a lot of end user computing, the downside is you lose track of it. When the end user leave the company, who is going to know how to maintain, right? Or if the system, the end user computing is being corrupted, what would be the implication? Or would there be some testing? Would there be backup? You know, a lot of all these questions. Okay, and it's very decentralized. How do you have a centralized view of all the computing? That's a big challenge. Okay, so when you audit, of course, you want to look at like in terms of the quality, the documentation, because it's quick. So a lot of time they compromise on the documentation, right? Whether it meets the business needs. You know, would there be sufficient testing, sufficient sign-off? That one you don't know. Gold plating means it's like the scope script. Okay, you want to start with certain thing, but as you work, you may deviate and go something else, somewhere else. Okay, so there may be some inconsistent naming convention, like some people call it this way, some people call it the other way. After that, you do not know the two are linked or not linked. And you may have very poor scalability, right? Especially in terms of end user computing. Okay, so these are some of the areas you want to look at when you audit the rapid application development. Okay, the other things that you want to look at is in terms of the change management. As you know, when things change, there is always risk. So in order to reduce the change management, of course, you have to follow certain methodology. You want to see who sign off, who approve it, and then how do they change? Do they test it? Do they sign off before they implement the change? All right. So change can have different type of risks. One is that it's unauthorized change. People may not want it, but someone went to change it. Or the other way around. You want the change, but they fail to implement it, or they implement it very late, right? Or the change is so haphazard, it's always unplanned. Certain times suddenly they bring the system down and they change it. So how do you look at all these risks? So there are various control, but as auditor, you may want to go and ask. You understand some of these matrix, right? Then you can go and ask, hey, how much time or how much work are unplanned? You know, if it's like 50% unplanned work, then you know something is wrong, right? This 5%, 10%, 15% is down to the management risk tolerance. Okay, so Here, what you can learn from it is understand some of these metrics and then see how you can use it to audit some of these risks. Okay. There are a lot of IT control framework, right? Some of them are specified in this GTAC. I don't think you need to go into every of all these GTAC to read them. It's good for your general knowledge, right? If one or two you want to read, get a flavor of how it is, right? They can go into very specific um, areas like governance, like in terms of cyber security, in terms of like disaster recovery, different things of different topics. They have different practice guide. Okay. Now, in terms of control objective, is not something different from what we have known, right? Safeguard your things, make sure that the things are, the reports, the data are secure, accurate, complete, and so on and so forth. Okay. Here, there are some indicators of effective control. So, of course, things are planned, project come in on time, resources are allocated, information are consistent across the organization, right? The controls are there, the monitorings are there. If there are some issues, the companies can quickly take on the issues and rectify it. So those are some of the indicators of good IT controls. Here on these slides here, you can see there are different IT controls, different hierarchy. On the first part here, these fall under probably the governance part, the policies, what things should be, and then you can see the management may also implement certain standards, the structure, environment controls, right? Then below here, you can see the system software control, system development control, application-based control. These are more technical, right? So see, in terms of our exam, we will always understand the risk, the control, the purpose, right? They will not go into the system software control and asking some technical things about software. Okay. Now, of course, controls, you can have different ways of classifying it, right? Governance, control, management, technical, right? Can be preventive, detective, corrective. Okay, general control, application control. Like we mentioned, application control, talk about like the input processing and the output. Okay, the rest of the IT controls mostly are fall under general controls, like your segregation of duties, like change control, project management, all this. Okay. Okay. On this graph, it shows very heavy, but what we want to say is that in terms of IT controls, right, it's basically like a bridge between the business objective and how to do the performance, the actual performance. So what is required? So you have this IT framework to help you link up with the business objective and the control framework, right? IT is not by itself. It has to be linked up. So after you link up, you have this framework. It's then split into your IT strategy, business strategy. All this needs to be linked up. Again, align with the organization structure, and then you have certain metrics to monitor the continuous performance. Right now, this IT framework, it can be any framework. It can be COVID. It can be COSO. It doesn't matter, right? And we are going to show you a few of the framework, especially like the IT, the COVID. But before that, let's try this first.
So we have mixed answers
Okay.
for all the options.
Okay. So here
C
is
mostly.
asking. Sorry.
C mostly, sir.
C mostly.
Option
Okay,
C.
that's good. That's good. Yeah, the answer is C. Right, the C. Okay. C. I think here they're asking about COVID, but the same principle would apply if they ask you about COSO ERM, or whatever framework. Okay, if they ask you about this, it's always to modify it to reflect the risk appetite and the risk tolerance. That should be the right answer, right? It has to be modified, either that to reflect risk appetite or to reflect the company culture, to reflect the company's objective or whatever. It must be modified. Okay, it is a good practice, but it should not be used as is. It must be modified. This as is a very generic framework, so we don't use generic things for our organization. Okay, detailed implementation guide is a framework, so it will not have the so-called detailed implementation guide. Okay, it includes overall organization. Okay, it may include certain control framework, but it will not include the company's controls. Um, okay, for overall, it will not include this, right? There are certain answer they may ask you whether it's more suitable for big companies, small companies, or certain industry. All those are not the real answer. Okay, so the answer should be that it must be modified. All right. So you know, in the last 2 weeks, we also spoke about the COSO model. If you recall, it starts with the control environment, then risk assessment, control activities, information and communicate and monitoring, right? So how do we apply this to the IT framework? So again, you see in terms of control environment, we talk about the governance. So maybe you want to have certain governance committee, steering committee, right? Then risk assessment, of course, is applied to the IT side, right? The IT risk assessment. After that, you will implement certain controls, right? And then you will do certain training to communicate what you need to do, communicate the expectation. And having done that, you will still have to monitor the performance. So you may have certain metrics, you may have certain reporting up the line. Okay, so that is how you implement the COSO framework to the IT. Remember earlier on we say about the control framework. Okay, here it can be any control framework, but it has to be just linked to what you use for the business process. Okay. The last one on in terms of the framework, not the last one, the next one is the COVID-5. All right. Just now you asked whether you need to know about earlier framework. No, just go for COVID-5. All right. There are 7 enablers here. Okay, and there are 5 key principles. So the 5 key principles, it has to meet all the stakeholders' needs. So it's not only the IT people, right? All stakeholders cover the enterprise end-to-end, and this would include the outsourced activities, right? We have to apply integrated or single integrated. So it doesn't mean that you must use only COVID. COVID can actually integrate with COSO and some other framework. So that would work as well. Okay, and it has to be a holistic approach. There is also an emphasis that they separate the governance from the management. Remember, in the COSO, we also talk about separating the board from the management. So you see, it's not something that's very different, right? So all these are the 5 principles of the COVID-5. Right? Then you have other frameworks in the market as well, like this ISO IEC 38500. This one is more of like providing some guiding principle to the management of the board. to say, okay, what is an acceptable control? What are the effective or efficient control, right? How do you decide that? So this guiding principle teach you how to decide on the controls, okay? It includes, of course, the internal and outsourced activities and provide guidance for the business professional as well. ISO 27000, on the other hand, focus more on the security part of it. Then this ITIL, it original from the IT infrastructure library. Okay, infrastructure library. So you can tell that it's more from the infrastructure part, right? Including like how do you manage your service, outsource, SLA, all these things. Okay. Do you need to really go into all these framework and know all of them? I don't think so. But more of like a flavor what it is, I think should be good enough. Focus more of your time, practice the question. So that come to the end of our part 3. I would, Chancellor, I think we can spend a bit of time, take some questions. I do have some test questions that I can let the participant give a try if we have time.
Yes, sir. We can
But
take some questions and we can have some practical.
Yeah.
What is difference between denial of service attack and designated denial of service?
Okay, the designated one means it's more coordinated and it's more widespread, and it will probably impact you on a few systems and services. Okay, like you have heard about, let's say the pipeline hacking in the US. Okay, so if they do that and coordinated with the airport system, seaport system, and all this to deny certain things, then it becomes like a more coordinated effort. Chancellor?
We can continue. We have some questions, but we can take later.
Oh, okay. Okay, so here I have some questions that I have shared with my other participants in other training, okay, for CIA Part 3. But I thought it is relating to some of the IT one. What I want to show you is that IT questions are not technically IT. They are more on like the control, the environment and all this. So I want to give you a flavor of it, okay?
Mostly is D, but some participants selected option C and B also.
Okay, yeah, the answer is D, all right, all of the above. Of course, I think one, you will agree, we have to assess the effectiveness of preventive, detective, and mitigation measure, right? When appropriate, we do make recommendation, right? We make recommendation. So if without the word recommendation, we implement enhancement, then that will not be correct. Okay, recommend is fine. We do confirm that the board has been appropriately informed of all the significant corrective measures. You want to know, especially if it's significant, right? Report to the management and the board. Yeah, we do report to them in terms of the compliance with the security rules and significant violation. Okay, so we do that.
Mostly A, sir.
Yes, correct. That's the right answer. Okay, so we do not want the data center operator to override the file. They should not have. Okay, so that's why this is accept. The rest are the correct expected controls.
Mostly C, sir, but we have all the answer A, B, C, D.
Okay, C is correct, right? Operations are the people who do it. Okay, board of director would not come and do the planning capacity, all right? The system people, the technical support, they support, but the owners come from the operation. See, if you are internal, I mean, you are the system people, how would you know how many transactions you want to process in a day? How would you know that the system needs to um, transfer 1,000 payment, 2,000 payment, 3,000 payment a day? You won't, right? So it has to come from the operations people. Okay.
Mostly B and C, also some A and D.
Okay. Okay. D, you probably didn't, you might have misread it. CFO will not develop all these IT security policies and the resource, right? Maybe the information security officers may develop all this policy, all right? Okay, system developer will not develop because it's end user application. Remember, end user application. So it's developed by the end user. For example, some of the spreadsheet that people use, right? So this one is a trick. Okay, a programmer should be okay. If they write it, they should not test it, right? It's a segregation of duty thing, right? So when you look at the testing, normally is we call end user testing, right? When you do the end user testing, the programmer should not have access to all those code anymore, right? So that is the control about segregation of duty. Now, data entry personnel minimize. See, if you go to the supermarket now, right? So when they sold the goods, they just scan, so they don't key in anymore. So that is to reduce the risk of manual entry or key in error, right? So they use the scanner, all those data entry uh, technology, right, to capture the data at a point, right, rather than sometime later. Okay, so the answer here is B, right?
Mostly A or D, sir, and other also B and C also we have.
Okay, first of all, I will cross out C, legal counsel. How would they oversee IT, right? D, because it's information officer. Okay, you have a point. CEO, you may have a point because it's the ultimate owner of the risk, right? Okay, but just remember for IT aspect, the answer here is A. Okay, the board of directors. So they are responsible for all this. Okay.
Mostly C, sir.
Yes, the answer is C. All right. See, what the question asks is that you are afraid that the message may be hacked or something. So you go and maintain it on the server. You just put the risk out there. So and if you maintain it for 3 years, you have the risk for 3 years. You make a backup on the server, you double the risk, right? So the best thing is to automatically delete it once you have downloaded. Okay.
all answers are A.
Oh, very good. Yeah, yes. The answer is A. Okay, so see, you download from a public domain, so you do not know the quality there, right? The rest wouldn't increase the risk.
Mostly B, sir. Some A or other also.
Okay. All right. So here is, okay, see, this question is asking about the audit objective and what you want to do with it, right? Although it's spin into like an IT thing, right? So you want to find payment that are made twice, okay? So you identify the transaction with the same vendor for the same amount. Perhaps you can find that, right? Transaction unauthorized vendor code, you may not find all these, you may not achieve the objective, right? This maybe is to find authorized person, right? Reasonableness test, maybe you want to see the trend, but you may not be able to find double payment unless the amount is like so big, all right? So the one duplicate purchase order, perhaps you can also find it as well, right? Because double entry, double payment. So the answer here is B, 1 and 4. Okay.
Mostly C, sir. We have mixed answers.
Okay. The answer is C, correct. Okay. So first of all, when you read this, right? Yeah, the electronic mail cannot be more secure than the computer system because you are as strong as the weakest link. Okay. Um, Email or electronic mail stored in the server as long as paper-based. If you don't do that, right, because of the cyber security, all these things on the server can be quite um, um, risky compared to like paper-based when you lock them in your store, whatever. Okay, so this is not a good thing to do. Then in a large organization, there are several um, administrator, yeah, you may have give them different level. See, when you have this, right, you know that 2 are out, so you will know that B and D are out. So it's either you decide whether 3 should be correct or not. Okay, so here 3 is the correct one, so you go for C. Okay, so your chances, if you are so unsure, you will choose between A and C. So you have 50% chance of correct. Okay. Okay, so that comes to the end of the question. So we will take any questions from the participant. So let me just close all this.
Please elaborate slide 78 to 80.
78 to 80, is it? Okay, so this one are the different type of tests that we do. So you will need to go back and read through, at least have an idea what they mean in terms of all these different tests. Okay. This one is in terms of the stages. Remember, in terms of the SDLC, we start with the planning, then the system requirement, system design, whether we buy or to build in-house. Then after that, you do your testing. After testing, you will go for the conversion. So maybe you want to change from the old system to the new system. So that is about the conversion and the implementation of the new system. Okay, so after you have done the new system, of course, you need to look back and see whether the system met the user requirement, right? Because you start off with user requirement. So how system meet the user requirement, and that give you the opportunity to learn from the experience and to fine-tune your system further. So that is about the conversion and the implementation stage, right? This part is on the documentation. See, what are your user requirement? What are the system that you change? The system functionality, and then what are the tests that you do? How do you make sure that you satisfy the test? Who sign off? All these are part of the documentation. So you want to document them as audit trail, right? So that next time, if you want to go back and understand certain thing, you can refer to it. And of course, audit may want to review this as well.
Slide 72 also, sir.
72. This one? This one is about system or the auditor's role. So we will do the testing, we'll review. So if there are any of all these functions here that are not done properly by the management, then we will raise an issue. So these are just examples of areas that we can review. It's not a full comprehensive list. Okay.
Another question: difference between system software control and application control covered in the slide with pyramid.
Cover in the slide what?
I think some pyramid type slide.
Okay.
Yeah. Software control and application control. System software control and application.
Okay. The software control is probably a little bit wider, as in like, how do you select the right software? And after you have selected the right software, how do you test it, make sure that it link it to the system, the requirement, right? Application control is very specific to the software in terms of what are the input control, what is the processing control, what is the output control. Now, let me give you an example to illustrate. Let's say in terms of the payment, all right? If you input $1,000, right, it has to be $1,000. You cannot input 1,000, it become 10,000. That's not correct. But in terms of input, how do you make sure that you have input $1,000? So maybe there is a maker, there is a checker. The system will enforce it such that staff A will input 1,000, staff B may input the same, look at the invoice and input again. If the amount match, then the system take it as correct, right? That is like a blind key in. So 2% key in. So that is the input control, right? The processing, of course, 1,000 plus 1,000 must be 2,000, right? And it has to process it in a certain time. It depends on the system requirement. When you need it to be paid like today, it has to pay today. If you need it to be paid by tomorrow, it will pay by tomorrow. So that is part of like the processing control. And output means like if after it has done, who will get notified of it. So that is like some part of the output control, right? But software could be even wider, right? After you have made all the payment, can I also know in a day how many you have processed, how many are done on a time before the cutoff time of say 4 p.m., how many are done after 4 p.m., which has to be carried forward to the next day. So all these may be part of the system controls that I want. I want certain report by what time, by what day, and what kind of information I need in the report. So that would be wider than the application control. So I hope I
The slide 84, please.
84. Okay. Slide 84 is talking about the change management. So when you want to change management, it could be, there are different type of change management. It could be code revision, it could be system upgrade, or it could be some infrastructure changes. What are infrastructure changes? Maybe you want to change a server, you want to change a cable, or you want to change a firewall. So all these are example of the change management, right? And when you have to change, they may be also times when there are patches. So because of the application, there may be certain bugs or something might have vulnerabilities may have been identified. So they need to do the change, right? So when you do the change, right, you need to do it in a planned manner so that it's predictable, refined, and then the process everybody is familiar with. You don't do changes like very in a ad hoc manner, such that people may not be familiar with the process, and therefore people may react in a different manner. So that is part of the controls that you want to see in the change management. And of course, on top of that, you want to see like who authorized, then who execute the change, who test the change, and then who sign off. So all those part of the things are part of the change management as well.
Thank you, sir. So one more question. In one of the question, is deleting email from server doesn't tantamount to a big risk in case of crash of individual system on which email is downloaded?
Okay. Of course, there are different ways that may come about, but I presume this one is that, okay, after you have downloaded, you have your own backup or you have your own way of safekeeping it, right? Yes, it may give rise to different type of risk, agree. Good point. But what the question was asking there was in terms of the hacking risk.
Thank you very much, sir. So requesting TK sir or Paul sir to give vote of thanks. So we close on time. And if someone had some more query which was not resolved during the session, they can mail me on coordination@iindia.co. I will take your advice and will revert.
Yeah.
Achal, the
Yeah.
whole question is over now. Yeah.
Sir, as of now, it's over.
Okay, you can take the question off.
It's over now. You can give the vote of thanks.
It is still on the screen. Yeah. Right.
I can.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we have come to the end of the third session, which we have scheduled. I wish to thank Namchi and also the Indian trainers, Dr. Jaikar, Deepak, and Kanwaljit, who were with us all through in this training program. I think it has been a wonderful experience, Namchi, taking all of us through the challenge exams. Most of us, even in the profession for a long time, are sometimes foxed by the trickiness of the questions. You have very, very skillfully explained these to us. I'm sure whatever complacency and overconfidence people may have had will not be there now, and they will really apply themselves, learning the study material that have been given, and also practicing more and more to make sure that they pass the exams in first attempt. I think the objective of bringing you for training our challenge participants has really been very productive and useful. And really thank you very much for your time, and wish to thank on behalf of IA India and all of us a big thank you. It's really been very useful. Your experience in conducting these trainings in Singapore is really as shown in your detailed explanations, patient hearing, and explaining the nuances to our team. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Jaikar, for staying through.
Thank you.
I know
Welcome. Thank
IT
you.
has been your forte,
Thank you, sir.
and I'm sure it will be very valuable to hear from you. I'm sure more and more students will benefit from your experience and training as well in the days to come. Thank you very much on our behalf. I'm sure these efforts will go a long way in making sure IIA India produces large number of challenge exam passes in the years to come. We are also going to launch the second round of challenge exams shortly in India. The more details will follow. And thank you very much. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Namchi,
everyone.
Thank
Sir.
you. Thank you.
stay on the
Thank you
line for
all
a few
in IIA India. Thank you, and thank you all the participants. I really hope that this can help you, and all the best. Practice a lot of questions.
Thank all of you, sir, and wish all the participants all the best for the exams.
Thank you. Thank you. Namchi, are you still on the line?
Yes, still on.
Just
still
if we
on.
can stay there for a few more minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, sure. Is the camera off, or I can't see anybody now?
Sanchal, you can switch off all the participants, attendees now.
No, sir. It's they have to leave.
Yeah. Okay.
We can connect if you can. I can share the link separately if you require.
No, I think we can wait for a few minutes. I think, yeah.
Shall I
just wait.
step down?
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Namchi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Quite a lot of questions, Namchi, all kinds from people. That's the way always.